All right, let's do it. Let's kick it off. Welcome to another episode of the Passive Investing Made Simple series. My name is not Whitney. She had to step out and ask me to fill in. My name is Taylor Koo, one of the investor relations associates here at passiveinvesting.com. This weekly webinar series is focused on helping you learn the different facets about passive investing and really just put this knowledge into action so you can confidently go into your first or next investment. If this is your first time joining us and you want to join live, make sure to register at passiveinvestingwithwhitney.com for future masterclass sessions and gain access to check out our open deals here at passiveinvesting.com. To kick off today's show, I want to bring in two very special guests from the acquisitions team here at passiveinvesting.com. Please give a warm welcome to Eric Fitzgerald and Christopher Neary.
Thanks, Taylor. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course. I try. It's really hard to follow up from Whitney. She really does a great job of it. So I'm going to do my best. But yeah, if you can go ahead and take a moment to introduce yourself and your role here at passiveinvesting.com.
Sure, I'll start. My name is Eric Fitzgerald. I head up our multifamily acquisitions team. So what that means is we travel to different markets, we underwrite deals, we try to build relationships with brokers to try to identify investment opportunities for our investors. I'm from Pennsylvania. I live here in Charlotte. I've got a background in property management and then acquisitions. So yeah, that's a little bit about myself. I'll turn it over to Chris.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, everyone. I am Chris Neary. I'm the Senior Acquisitions Associate working on the same team as Eric Fitzgerald. I reside in Charleston, South Carolina, and I am originally from Long Island, New York. So I help with the acquisition. So we're deal sourcing, underwriting, all the way to closing deals together.
Awesome. Well, let's dive right into it. So if you're here to learn about Boise, Idaho, this is not the episode you should be listening to. If you're here to learn about Reno, Nevada, or any other market, this is not to be the episode to be listening to unless you're here to learn about the Nashville market. Now, I'm excited for this episode because we've been looking into Nashville for a while, and we are currently under contract on our first asset in Nashville. But before we dive right into that, though, for the investors that are new to passive investing or didn't quite go into their first investment as they should have, on a broader scale, what should investors be looking for in a market? And then also how does that help us hone in on the markets that we look at?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think as far as our company, we try to focus in on growing markets. So a lot of that is in the Southeastern United States. So a lot of us are based in the Carolinas, so we kind of see that growth happening. We have a lot of good relationships here. That's kind of where our portfolio got started over the last, I would probably say, a few years, 3 to 2 years. We made more of a concerted effort to start growing in other markets in the Southeast. So a few of those markets being Charleston, Houston, Texas, Orlando, Florida, which we've all acquired assets in. So all of these markets have things in common. Landlord tenant laws is a big one. So how much power do we have as a landlord to, evict or to be properly compensated for the dwelling that we're providing? So that's an important kind of aspect on the market. The classic ones are always going to be population growth, job growth, median income of the area. What are the employment drivers of the specific submarkets? So these are all things that luckily as a passive investor, you probably should be looking at, but luckily, working with a company like us, we do all that kind of work up front. So that's kind of the markets that we try to identify, and certainly Nashville fits that bill. And I'll let Chris speak on kind of broad market stuff if I missed anything there.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when we're diving into a new market like Nashville, it's new to us in a deal sense, but it's something that I know Eric, when he first came on, he was looking on deals there, just not as a larger scale that we are today. But anytime we look into a new market, we're looking at the economy as a whole, whether that's, recent corporate relocations or what is the economic growth or factor going on in Nashville MSA, not just the downtown area, but the larger scale of Nashville. So another thing of that would be like GDP growth, population growth. A lot of these Eric already mentioned, and I can actually show some specifics pertaining to Nashville if it's okay to share my screen here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to see it.
We came prepared.
I love it.
Awesome. So can everyone see that? Can you guys see that?
Yep.
Perfect. So this is just going over some specifics on Nashville's economy and the growth that it has had in the past recent couple of years. So as I mentioned, some recent corporate relocations as well as expansions are happening within the market of Nashville, as well as just the cost of living compared to other cities throughout the country. You can see net migration is a big thing that we track, as well as net absorption and deliveries of units. And we can dive in those if those are things that people are not fully understanding at a high level.
Yeah, I'd
as
actually
well as,
love if you can break that down too.
absolutely. So I actually have another slide here that we can look at
Perfect.
this.
Yeah, that's great.
Eric, do you want to dive into this one right here?
Yeah. So on the supply.
Yeah, just what absorption versus the delivery rate and how that affects a lot of this growth and demand within Nashville itself.
Sure. So, net absorption is something that we look at. I would say more on a submarket basis. It is good to see what Nashville as a whole is doing as far as supply and demand. But you can see, especially in 2021 in Nashville, that's a huge difference there in net absorption versus delivery, basically meaning that the demand is far outstripping the supply of Nashville. So that's something that we saw in the beginning of the year, and we identified, okay, Nashville is going to be a market that we really want to make a concerted effort to try to get into this year. It's a market that we had tried to get into a couple of years, prior, never was able to find the right deal at the right price. Finally found one just a month or two ago, so we're very excited about that. But yeah, net absorption is something that we'll track, and we noticed a really big kind of imbalance in 2021 on the kind of rental rates exploding because of the outsized demand compared to the supply, with all the new people moving there, and so that's kind of what we saw. These charts can be broken down submarket by submarket a little bit more in a little bit more usable of a format. To where you can say, okay, this submarket is it's maybe the jurisdiction, it's hard to build new product there for whatever reason. There's not a whole lot of supply coming in, but you can see that demand is there. By occupancy rates are super high, rental rates are growing quickly, and that's the kind of submarkets that we want to be in inside of those broader markets.
Absolutely.
And so with the demand, and I saw a little bit on the previous chart beforehand, I'd love if you can dive into some of the economic drivers that are really driving the demand and this net migration coming into Nashville.
Perfect. Let me actually pull up a lot of the new developments that are actually coming into Nashville. I hope this is helpful to some of you. I like to show visuals. It just helps me see some things as well. So you can see that there are some very large projects that are underway. This is more of the downtown and midtown of Nashville, but this does not limit anything within the MSA. Eric and I actually saw a huge development, over $1 billion, going in a submarket about 20 minutes outside of downtown. So this is happening not only within the downtown, but throughout all of Nashville MSA. You can see some of these developments that are coming in to support these large businesses that are down here. So the development above is actually the company that will be going in is actually part of the development here. You can see the ones that are under construction. These three are well over $1 billion or equal to $1 billion. Some of these are hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars that are already completed, some of them are planned and or are under development. So there's it's a very job friendly and company friendly city and state for that matter. There's no state income tax. I actually have a slide here showing that. Sorry, I have a lot of slides. Let me just pull it up. There's one talking about how it is a very job-friendly landscape, or company-friendly for that matter. So here we go. Oh, going too quick. So you have minimal exposure. It's top 5 in the life and science in space. There's no state income tax, and for the past 8 years, there's been 30,000 plus jobs coming into Nashville itself. And where these people are coming from, 60% of Vanderbilt students actually stay within Nashville, and those are very high, very brilliant students that are staying. So that's a big economic factor. There's a very large medical supply as well, medical demand. There's great hospitals within Nashville. I might be forgetting something here as well. So you saw like companies like Oracle and Amazon. Amazon's expanding, Oracle's coming in, as well as a plethora of other companies. Let's see. Here you go.
Yeah. And it's always going to be your question about demand. It's always going to be the jobs. So you see that there was a chart in there about Nashville being number 2 in the nation, right behind Austin in job growth. I believe it was over the last decade and projected in the future. So that's where the demand is coming from. That's a great chart right there showing some of the corporate headquarter relocations recently. But it's just the insane job growth that fuels obviously population growth, wage growth, and then rents. So Nashville was a market that we identified that had all the right kind of metrics working for it as far as job growth goes.
Yeah. And I love seeing that too, just because there's a strong diversification of employers and it's not heavily relied on just one sector. And I see that with all the other markets that we're looking at. We want to make sure that we're looking at a market that has a strong diversification of employers. But to your point, Chris and Eric, with Nashville being a large MSA, I would love if we can dive into the submarkets and what helps us determine where we're looking for our assets. Because with the current one that we have, Accent Edgewood, it's about I was actually going to say it was about 2.8 miles away from Vanderbilt.
Yeah. So, I mean, specifically, well, I guess I'll start kind of on a broader sense about what we look for in a submarket, and then maybe we can drill down a little bit more into this one specifically. But, the idea of this submarket here is that we're so close to downtown, but the rents in downtown Nashville are maybe $3 a square foot and above. And so your young professionals who maybe work in downtown Nashville or work in the Gulch or Midtown, they want to maybe have a residence that is 10-minute or 5-minute drive away, but 50 to $80, 80 cent per square foot lower than what they're paying in downtown Nashville. So the story with this submarket is it's a better cost alternative to a young professional that's working in downtown Nashville or in the Gulch or Sobro or Midtown, some of those major submarkets, but they can get a discount on rent here because we're a little bit further out from that location.
And so is this the only area that we are looking for within Nashville? Is there any other up and coming areas that we should also be looking at and that we've seen a lot of development around?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing all kinds of stuff. The Gulch is a good kind of younger demographic area, along with Sobro. A lot of jobs in the Midtown, downtown area that we just kind of talked about. A lot of those new developments going in. Even the submarkets of Nashville, you kind of saw the COVID submarket shift or suburb shift, where the suburbs started seeing really strong rent growth out in the suburbs. So we've looked at a couple deals in the suburbs that are at 20% rent growth over the last year and things like that. So it's pretty crazy. It's something that we see in kind of all MSAs. There are certainly areas that we've identified that we don't want to be in Nashville, but as far as good locations in Nashville, there's plenty of them. There's plenty of jobs, even out to some of the suburbs where we looked at a couple deals already.
That actually brings up another point then, because I hear some market reports and they're always talking about the great things about what's going on in the MSA, but what are some things that we should watch out for when we're looking at a market on a broader scale? And then also, I guess, specifically to Nashville and why we're staying away from those?
I'd say on a broader market, just watching out for jobs. So how concentrated is the job pool to one or two employers? That is obviously something that we don't want to see, is a sub-market or market too dependent on one or two employers. So job diversity is a huge thing that we'll look at when we're entering new markets. And that's just something that, we kind of have to dig in a little bit, do a little bit more research. So we'll always do kind of market trips and talk to the brokers, drive around the areas. If we're touring a property, the question is always, where are people working that live here? An answer that we got specifically for Edgewood is it's basically all young professionals, tech, finance, banking, all the kind of buckets that you like to see, education, healthcare. So we were very comfortable with this location, but it is something that you do have to look at as a passive investor or a general, investor like we are, is how concentrated are your jobs in that area.
Hmm. I love it. I love to hear it. And then now this is bringing in some insider information too, because I ended up speaking with our director of asset management, Brian, and he said that you guys were, walking around and talking to different businesses and owners. I'd love to know the approach then of what you're really looking for, I guess, when you're uh, trying to learn more about the local presence there, because in particular to Edgewood, some of the questions that we had was that, oh, it's around an industrial area, is this really going to keep up with uh, the net migration in that younger population demographic that we're going after?
Yeah, Brian is the master of some market research. So he's been doing it for 30 some years. So it's always interesting to kind of watch how he does it. So, we'll get down. We're at the property at Accent Edgewood. We just hopped in his rental car and we just started driving. So we drive kind of at a circle, starting at the property and then start going further out, and just, hitting that circle, trying to see what is all around the property, who's walking around, what kind of cars are driving around, what kind of businesses are around. So I don't know if there is that map of Edgewood with Sobro and the Gulch. If we could maybe pull that up, and that might help kind of illustrate what I'm talking about. But yeah, there it was. So when we started driving towards Sobro, towards Gulch, and to the left a little bit, that area in there, home values are 600, 700, 800, $800,000, new townhome developments. There's a Soho house, I think it was called, which is like a social club for rich hipsters, I think is the way of putting it. So I don't know. I don't know how many people are familiar with Charlotte, but it reminded me a lot of the NODA area of Charlotte, kind of a younger, hipper demographic with lots of expendable income, a lot of art, a lot of breweries. So that's kind of the area that we're immediately surrounding. And it's certainly starting to push out towards us. And there were some questions about the industrial kind of around to our left and behind us. A good encouraging sign of that starting to be gentrified, if you want to call gentrification good. Whether or not you do, that's another question. But further kind of south, away from downtown, there's new residential home development going in right off of that road there. There's new businesses going in. There's a new apartment complex going in. So that gentrification that has already happened kind of 2 minutes down the road to the left is kind of starting to push out towards Accent. We think it'll be about 18 months before this location becomes the brewery central, hipster Soho House type of place that's going to be. But even right now, it's a great place to live. It's right near downtown. It's right near all those breweries. So we feel really good about this kind of micro location.
Yeah,
Thank
I can
you.
build to that slightly. There's some a really cool development going in not far from the property that I'm trying to pull up here. It's actually the Nashville Football Club Stadium that's opening up just under 2 miles. Here it is. Their first home game is actually May of this year, which is really exciting. They just started releasing tickets. So similar to something like Charlotte that I know Eric is very familiar with, is they're bringing these MLS soccer teams within these neighborhoods of these new cities, or not new cities, but neighborhoods that are bringing an influx of fans and breweries and bars and apartment complexes, and we're seeing that in this specific submarket, which we're really excited for. This is actually, I think it's 1.5 miles west of the property, so I'll show you on the map here. It's right around here. So that's another huge development going in. It's already built. They're going to be starting in May here.
Maybe you could talk about, I know there's a couple more developments that we drove past right in that immediate area as well, up on some of those slides.
Yes, so I skimmed through them a little bit quick here, but you have, let's see, the Finery, which I believe is constructed, or we saw this one being constructed, but there's about 200,000 square foot creative office space. I think their biggest signer is Apple Music to date. So we're going to be seeing that come in, as well as the Nashville Warehouse Co., which we actually passed by. I'm not sure if it's operational quite yet, but it's another 150,000 square foot of office space. So there's a lot of offices that are actually coming out of town. These bigger companies are going downtown, like Oracle, Amazon, but these smaller companies are, or not smaller, Apple Music is renting these facilities just outside the city. And
I think I've heard of Apple Music. It's one of
yeah,
those smaller up and coming companies.
that's right. That's right. Exactly. So you can see how massive these projects are. This one's really cool. It has a soccer stadium or soccer field on top of the roof at this one. And we drove by this. This is already developed and just starting to open up to those new leases. I think there's another one. No, that was it.
On a side note, I was looking at that soccer stadium. It would suck if you kicked it over and you had to go chase it. That wouldn't be fun. But it looks beautiful. It looks absolutely beautiful. And then we also had a comment coming here saying sports. Woo, yeah, go sports. Well, so kind of switching gears, then we had a question come in. So we talked about some of the submarkets that we're in. Now coming in, what submarket locations would we not want to be in within Nashville?
Yeah, so, I would say on a general note that north of Nashville is going to be a little bit tighter in terms of demographics, what kind of rent growth you might be able to see. East Nashville is going to be not as hard, but a little bit more micro location specific, I would say is the way to put it. As far as East Nashville, there's a lot of development going on West Nashville, kind of where the Gulch is, and then out, and then South Nashville, where Accent Edgewood, out really all the way out into like Antioch, where there's a $2 billion development going on about 20 minutes south of Nashville. And then that actually continues all the way down into Murfreesboro. So that's what I would say as far as what we look at a little bit harder when we see locations coming out in Nashville are those kind of north of Nashville and kind of a little bit east areas. But we found, especially with all the conversations with the brokers, is that a lot of the capital is chasing the west and the south of Nashville areas.
So you have this river that actually breaks up downtown, as well as like Western Nashville or Northwestern. And that a lot of the development or older development is actually in that northern region. And we're starting to hear that that's going to be transformed and gentrified as we're seeing in the South. But a lot of the wealth that Eric has mentioned is in the south of the town or the city of downtown Nashville. So that's the areas we're focusing on, but we're keeping an eye on that north. There's less deal flow, but there's definitely deals that are coming, I think, in the next 2 to 5 years that may be of interest.
That is good to know. Now we've spoken a lot about the the risks and the demographics of the actual residents that are going to be going into these markets. Are there any weather risks that come about when investing in Nashville?
No, no. Luckily,
Easy, perfect.
no tsunamis, no real hurricanes or tornadoes. So that is something, especially as we get our insurance quotes on these types of deals, is something that we have to take into account. But luckily, Nashville is relatively mild to a lot of other places in the country, which is nice.
Got it. We just had another question come in. So what is the infrastructure planning on looking like in terms of highways to handle all the influx of people? I remember traffic on Route 40 to be horrendous. Everyone living there seems to complain about it. Would you two like to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, that in any growing city, I mean, we see that here in Charlotte. That is a good question, though, as far as what they're planning to do. Compared to cities like LA, I would say that this place is heaven as far as traffic goes, but there definitely is some catching up that needs to be done on southeastern cities like Nashville that are just trying to keep up with the population growth and the demand of these types of submarkets. So it'll be interesting. I think one of the conversations with the broker, they were talking about some kind of public transportation system that would go north to south. I don't know what stage that's in, but it'll be interesting to see kind of the projects that evolve out of that need to keep up with the demand.
Has majority of the transportation just been driving then to, I guess, wherever they need to? Is that the main form of transportation here in Nashville?
Yep, I would say so.
So
yeah, I think it's a bike friendly city as well, but there's no major public transport.
Public transportation.
That's most of. Unfortunately, that's most of the USA. We're pretty far behind, but
getting there. Got it. Is there anything else y'all would like to touch on with? Oh, the questions. You know what? I guess we're just diving into questions right now. Questions are filing in, and we're going to the Q&A then.
All right.
Cool. All right. So the question is: Nashville does have heavy rains and light snow 4 to 5 times a year. So will the surface parking be an issue, and will there be cameras in the parking area? And so I believe they're referring to our asset over at Edgewood.
Yeah. So yes, so there will be cameras. We're actually discussing private resident gate, more so just for the privacy feel for the residents, but that could also add to feeling comfortable with security as well. As far as the surface parking, it's actually really cool. The way they built the surface park is it's actually permeable. The gravel, it's not gravel, but I don't know what exactly you would call it, but the way they were explaining it was that the rain actually can go beneath and flow out of the parking lot. So it's not just your kind of regular blacktop. It's like and I wish I knew the name for it, but it's pretty cool. It kind of is permeable, so the water can actually penetrate and go out through the drainage system.
Good to know.
I'm going to stop sharing here if that's okay. My screen. Perfect.
Well, as we are wrapping up just this quick Nashville market report, and I guess before we go into any other questions too, I just want to say thank you to the both of you for joining me today. And for the audience, if you have to leave, no worries. If a question comes up, feel free to reach out to us. And just thank you for taking the time out of your day to invest in yourself and spend it with us. And so make sure to join in for next week's session by registering at masterclass.passiveinvesting.com/registration for future sessions. And then if you're ready to check out our deal flow, go to passiveinvestingwithwhitney.com to get on the list, set up a time to talk. And we'll be on here for a couple more minutes if any other questions come up.